The laughter came over an open diplomatic channel, while 12 million civilians on the moon of Halcyon Prime waited to learn whether they were about to die. It was not nervous laughter. It was not the strained sound of a commander masking fear. It was rich, amused, almost indulgent, the kind of laugh a predator made when something weaker had mistaken itself for dangerous. Across the central hollow well of the Galactic Council chamber, Admiral Zalor of the Ver Dominion leaned back in his command cradle aboard the battle carrier Indomitable Wrath, gold rank spines glittering under the bridge lights, and smiled as though the matter before him were entertainment rather than a blockade, a hostage moon, and a Terran ultimatum. His fleet hung in orbit above Halcyon Prime like a steel storm. Hundreds of warships, siege mirrors armed, kinetic spears loaded, atmospheric disruption platforms already unfolding. The moon below had tried to invoke neutral protections under Council law after Ver Marines had landed without authorization. The Council had objected. The Ver had ignored them. Then Earth had transmitted a single demand. Withdraw from the moon, stand down, release all civilian detainees. Zalor laughed. Every species in the chamber heard it. Every diplomatic relay in 3 sectors carried it. Every human ship listening in silence heard the exact moment the line was crossed. Councillor Marion of the Luth, whose people had survived 2 imperial purges by knowing when to bow their heads, actually flinched. The chamber lights reflected in her black, liquid eyes as she turned toward the Terran delegation with something close to pity. Humanity had only been a full council member for 19 standard years. They were respected in trade, admired in engineering, tolerated in politics, and quietly mocked in strategic circles. Too emotional, said the Arkeni. Too legalistic, said the Luth. Too attached to civilian life, said the Ver. Their fleets were compact and disciplined, yes, but small by imperial standards. Their commanders spoke softly. Their diplomats used words like proportionality and restraint. Powers like the Dominion mistook that for fragility. At the Terran dais, Ambassador Elias Vance did not react at first. He simply folded his hands behind his back and watched the hologram of the laughing admiral. He was an older man, silver at the temples, expression cut from stone. Beside him stood Fleet Liaison Commander Nia Solari, in dress black, jaw locked so tightly the muscle fluttered once near her ear. Neither human spoke while Zalor's laughter died, and the Ver Admiral wiped a tear from one ridged cheek. "You issue demands," Zalor said at last, his translator smoothing the contempt without reducing it. "To the Dominion, over a mining moon with no sovereign army, no fleet, and no relevance beyond helium extraction and agricultural reserve storage. You posture because your species has won some border skirmishes against pirates and thinks itself civilized enough to lecture empires. This is why the Council finds you tiresome. You confuse procedure with power." The chamber held its breath. Vance answered so quietly the system had to amplify him. "Halcyon Prime's moon is protected territory under Accord 9. Accord 9 exists because weak worlds need paper shields." "It exists," Vance said, "because the alternative is slaughter." Zalor's smile thinned. "Then let them learn." The hollow shifted as one of his officers displayed live images from the moon. Human aid workers and local medics knelt in a cargo square under Ver gunships. Lines of civilians were being marched toward detention domes. A child looked up into the camera feed, face white with dust and fear. Then the image cut to a Ver Marine driving an electrostaff into the back of a kneeling administrator who had refused to sign an annexation order. The administrator collapsed. A Ver officer planted a Dominion banner over him. Council gasps rippled through the chamber. That should have been enough. Under council law, enough to trigger sanctions, interdiction, emergency arbitration, censure. Enough to fill archives with outrage and committees with righteous speeches. But the Ver Dominion had broken laws before. They had weathered sanctions before. They were large enough, brutal enough, economically woven enough into half the council's supply chain that most crises ended the same way. Condemnation now, accommodation later. Then Zalor made his mistake. "Transmit this to Earth as well," he said, and the bridge camera widened. Two figures were dragged onto the indomitable Wrath's command deck. Human, civilian. One was a shuttle pilot from the relief convoy intercepted 3 hours earlier. The other was a legal observer attached to the Council's own neutral mission, a woman whose white sash still marked her protected status. She was bleeding from the forehead, but still upright. The Ver shoved them to their knees within sight of the Admiral's chair. Counselor Marion whispered, "No." Even some Ver officers looked uneasy. Zalor didn't. He stared into the diplomatic feed and addressed the Terran dais as though speaking to stubborn children. "Take your ultimatum back, publicly. Acknowledge Dominion authority over Halcyon Prime's protectorate holdings. Sign a statement recognizing our military prerogative in disputed orbitals. Or these two die first. After that, the moon begins to burn." He smiled again. "You have 6 minutes." Silence fell so hard it felt physical. The kind of silence people remember years later, because some instinct deep inside them already knows history has stepped into the room. Ambassador Vance turned slightly toward Commander Solari. No words passed between them. None were needed. Solari touched 2 fingers to the black band on her left wrist, an old Terran naval gesture predating their jump drives, predating their first extrasolar colony, born in the age when ships still crossed oceans instead of stars. Order received. Witness acknowledged. Then she tapped a control stud hidden beneath the diplomatic rail. No alarm sounded. No dramatic music swelled. The chamber did not shake. Nothing outward happened at all. That was what made it so frightening. Far beyond the council chamber, beyond Halcyon Prime, beyond the edge of the Ver cordon itself, an encrypted transmission reached the flagship of the Terran's 6th Expeditionary Group. It was only 3 words long. Black Protocol confirmed. On the command deck of the TNS Resolute, Admiral June Sato read the message once and closed her eyes. Every officer on the bridge knew what it meant. None spoke. No one celebrated. No one hesitated. The 6th had been holding position in cold drift beyond the system's cometary shelf for 19 hours, drives dark, emissions masked, running silent under a thermal profile indistinguishable from broken rock. To Ver scans, there was nothing there but debris and darkness. The Dominion believed humans worshipped transparency, doctrine, and the approval of law. It had never occurred to them that the same species capable of building the Council's finest mediation framework had also authored a war doctrine so severe it had only been discussed in classified chambers under biometric seal. Not because humanity loved war, because humanity remembered what happened when cruel powers mistook mercy for inability. Sato opened her eyes. "Authenticate." "Black Protocol authenticated," her operations chief replied, voice steady but pale. "All task groups receiving." "Civilian hostage status?" "Council observer and shuttle pilot still alive. Halcyon Moon population centers intact. Ver siege mirrors charging." "Then we are inside threshold." Sato rose from her chair. She was small, spare, almost unimpressive until she moved, and then the entire bridge seemed to orient around her. Signal all vessels. Doctrine posture electo. No warnings, no challenge, no quarter to armed resistance in orbital battle space. Priority 1. Disable siege assets before atmospheric strike. Priority 2. Recover hostages. Priority 3. Erase their ability to do this again. A younger lieutenant swallowed. Admiral, erase? Sato looked at the tactical display, where the Vare fleet shimmered in red rings around the helpless moon. Yes, she said. Erase. Across the hidden Terran formation, crews snapped into motion with the eerie calm of people doing what they had trained for in nightmares and hoped never to be ordered to perform. Missile cells rotated open in vacuum-black silence. Rail lances charged without a sound. Electronic warfare suites woke like dormant predators. Beneath armored decks, autonomous kill vehicles detached from magnetic cradles by the hundreds. The Terran fleet was smaller than the Vare by every visible metric. That was what every Imperial analyst saw when they compared tonnage, hull count, and broadside capacity. They never saw the rest of the equation. Humanity had spent decades looking at the great empires of the galaxy and asking a simple question no one else bothered to ask. What if fleets are too proud to disappear? The answer had reshaped everything. At minute 5 of Zalor's ultimatum, the outer sensor net of the Vare Dominion went blind. Not degraded, not jammed, blind. Dozens of picket frigates stationed near Halcyon's outer approach suddenly lost telemetry, then internal comms, then power across fire control grids in a cascading systems collapse that no one on their bridges understood until their own tactical screens began displaying Terran command strings inside their core architecture. Human intrusion spores, delivered hours earlier by stealth microdrones hidden in relief cargo canisters deliberately allowed to be captured, blossomed through Vare networks like digital rot. Hard-sealed systems survived for 9 seconds. Then the second layer hit. Localized gravitic pulse packets tuned to overload shield governors from within. On the indomitable Wrath, warning klaxons finally began to scream. Zalor half rose from his cradle. Report! Sensor blackout on perimeter groups. Cause? Unknown. No, wait! Multiple contacts emerging. Range impossible. The tactical hologram lit with new signatures inside the Vare outer formation, then inside the middle ring, then, impossibly, inside the inner battle space itself. Terran vessels were not arriving from a jump corridor. They were already there, hidden in thermal sink shells, tucked into the electromagnetic clutter of Halcyon's magnetosphere and the debris shadow of old mining scaffolds. For 18 hours, human ships had drifted through the dead angles of Dominion patrol patterns, using the Vare fleet's own arrogance as cover. Then the first Vare destroyer vanished in a bloom of white metal and atmosphere. Not hit from afar, cut apart. A Terran strike corvette erupted from shadow beneath it, so close the Dominion ship's point defenses could not depress in time. 2 magnetic breacher torpedoes punched through the destroyer's ventral shield gap and detonated inside the reactor spine. The vessel folded, snapped, and turned into expanding fire. Then another did. Then 6 more. The council chamber stared in stunned silence as the live feed from Halcyon transformed into chaos. Across orbital space, Vare warships began exploding in seemingly random sequence. Communication lattices choked. Targeting systems fed false friend or foe returns into their own batteries. Siege mirrors rotated away from the moon and fired harmlessly into vacuum, because their command links had been hijacked at the exact moment their safety overrides died. Ambassador Vance did not smile. Zalor's bridge shook. Officers shouted over one another. "Terran contacts in inner screen! Drive signatures masked! We have drone saturation from below the ecliptic! Starboard group is firing on itself! Admiral, our missile authorizations are locked out!" "How?" Zalor roared. No one answered, because the answer was intolerable. Humans had not come to challenge the Ver fleet in the old way, with lines and broadsides and proud declarations. They had come to dissect it. Every doctrine the Dominion loved, concentration of force, intimidation through mass, command centralization, theatrical superiority, had been turned into a weakness and then struck all at once. The first minute cost Zalor 23 ships. The second cost him 60. Terran long-range kinetics finally announced themselves then, falling from deep black in relativistic spears that crossed the battle space too fast for meaningful interception. Not aimed at hull centers, aiming for throats, engine roots, magazine locks, shield synchronization nodes. Human fire control did not waste shots on destruction when mutilation would do. Ver capital ships went dead in space, tumbling, venting, blinded. Swarms of Terran autonomous cutters descended on them immediately, skipping across crippled shields, shearing weapons arrays away like butchers stripping bone. "Get me firing solutions," Zalor shouted. "We can't stabilize the grid. Manual control! Manual crews are gone." That was another hidden piece. Hours before the ultimatum, before the laughter, before the hostage threat, human covert inserts operating from disguised civilian tugs had seeded micro-sabotage packages across Ver maintenance docks servicing the blockade. Nothing dramatic. A valve fault here, a conduit burn there, a corrupt calibration in a defense node. Alone, each flaw meant inconvenience. Together, under battle stress, they became paralysis. The Ver had thought they were facing a moral species constrained by law. They had not realized law had simply bought humanity time to map them thoroughly enough to kill them efficiently. On the moon below, civilians looked up through shelter domes and saw the sky tearing itself apart. Fragments of burning warships crossed the upper atmosphere like meteors. Ver trooplanders lost command links and crashed into empty planes. Terran drop darts speared down through orbital fire, carrying marine retrieval teams directly into detention zones and weapons hubs. The first human boots to hit Halcyon soil did not waste breath on speeches. They cut fences, dropped shield blankets over civilians, and transmitted a simple message on all emergency bands. "Stay low. Stay inside. We are here." At the council chamber, half the delegates had risen from their seats. Some in horror, some in fascination. Some because they understood, far too late, that they were witnessing the unveiling of a military doctrine humanity had deliberately kept buried beneath decades of polite restraint. Commander Solari finally spoke. "You all assumed," she said, without looking away from the feed, "that because we built rules, we would die by them." No one answered her. On the indomitable Wrath, Zalor forced a narrow corridor open through the noise and saw the shape of the battle for what it was. The Terrans were not trying to defeat him ship for ship. They were collapsing his fleet as a system. Knives into ligaments, poisons into blood, blindness before amputation. His formation no longer existed. It was a field of isolated hulks, panicked captains, false orders, and burning wrecks. He still had more mass than the humans, more guns on paper. But paper did not matter when the nervous system had been ripped out. Then a new contact appeared dead ahead of his flagship. One ship, Medium displacement. Black hull. No escort visible. It coasted through drifting debris with its running lights off, nose pointed directly at the indomitable Wrath. The designation tag resolved on his tactical screen. TNS Quiet Resolve. A human ship daring to approach his carrier inside the wreckage of his own screen. Zalor felt insult ignite through the fear. Target that vessel.
Full forward batteries. Burn it out of space.
We have intermittent lock.
Then fire visually. The indomitable Wrath unleashed a broadside that split the darkness open. Plasma waves, kinetic storms, defense clusters firing in manual desperation. The quiet resolve seemed to vanish inside the barrage. Then it emerged untouched from beneath it. Not through stronger shields, through movement. The Terran ship had not dodged in any way Dominion simulations considered sane. It had plunged toward the battle carrier's firing geometry, collapsing range so brutally that most of the heavy batteries overshot or lost track against their own hull reflections. Secondary guns tore chunks from the Quiet Resolve's armor, but the ship kept coming, venting atmosphere, trailing sparks, almost indifferent to damage. Zalor realized with a chill that the humans were using a doctrine no civilized navy still practiced. Closing to grappling kill. "Back thrusters!" he shouted. Too late. The Quiet Resolve launched 6 breacher lances at point-blank range into the indomitable Wrath's shield seam, where maintenance cycling had opened a micro-fluctuation 37 seconds earlier. Human cyber warfare had known exactly when that seam would appear, because they had been inside the Ver logistics architecture for days. The lances punched through. Boarding locks fired. Counter-rotation clamps engaged with a scream of tortured metal. A Ver bridge officer whispered, stunned. "They're attaching." Zalor stared. No rational species boarded a live battle carrier at the center of an active fleet engagement unless it intended something beyond victory. It intended a message. Terran Marines entered the indomitable Wrath like compressed violence. Helmet cams later recovered by the Council would show almost nothing theatrical. No roaring charges, no swagger. Just disciplined figures moving through smoke and alarm lights with precise economy, bypassing surrendering crew, killing only resistors, severing routes to the command deck. Every junction they crossed was marked in advance. Every bulkhead code already compromised. Human tactical doctrine had treated the flagship less like an enemy mystery and more like a machine to be opened along known fault lines. At the same moment, special operations teams struck the execution chamber where the 2 human hostages had been held under guard. The shuttle pilot was unconscious. The legal observer was still fighting so hard that one Ver guard had a broken wrist. Both were extracted alive. The Council saw that too. They saw the humans rescue their own and the neutral observer while the battle still raged. They saw medics cover the wounded Ver guard as well, because disciplined terror is still disciplined. That detail would matter later. In the years that followed, species across the Council would speak in low voices about what truly frightened them. It was not only that humans could annihilate a fleet in minutes. It was that they could do it without losing control of why they had started. On Zalor's bridge, emergency shutters slammed halfway down before jamming. Smoke bled from ruptured consoles. The main tactical display dissolved into static and casualty icons. Nearly half his fleet was destroyed or derelict. Another third was retreating in fragmented clusters, only to be hunted down by Terran interceptors emerging from every blind angle. His communications officer turned, face gray. "Admiral, 6th and 9th groups are gone." "Gone where?" The officer swallowed. "Gone." Zalor looked again, as if numbers might reassemble themselves into dignity. They did not. Ships he had commanded for decades were debris. Battleships that had broken frontier rebellions were cooling metal. Cruisers whose mere arrival once ended negotiations were now drifting wreckage with their reactor cores slid open. He had laughed 6 minutes earlier. Now his fleet was becoming a cemetery. The bridge doors blew inward. Terran Marines flooded in under a storm of sparks. Their honor guards fired and died almost where they stood. One Marine put a shot through the weapon mount over Zalor's chair without even glancing at him, removing the last possibility of defiance in one efficient movement. Then they were there, rifles trained, optics unreadable behind polarized visors. The lead Marine spoke in perfect Dominion standard. "Admiral Zalor, you are relieved of command. Order all surviving units to stand down." Zalor's crest flared in disbelief and rage. "You board my flagship, butcher my fleet, and speak to me of command?" The Marine's weapon never wavered. "You threatened protected civilians, violated council law, took hostages on a diplomatic channel, and prepared an orbital atrocity. You are no longer operating under recognized wartime authority. Stand your forces down." Even then, even surrounded by the ruin he had made for himself, Zalor tried to cling to the old imperial script. "The Dominion will answer this with extermination." A new voice came over the bridge speakers, patched in from the quiet resolve. Admiral Jun Sato. "Then let them explain to the galaxy," she said, calm as vacuum, "why extermination is their answer to being stopped." Zalor looked toward the nearest intact display where the council chamber feed was still active. They had all seen it. His threat, his hostages, his laughter, his defeat. He suddenly understood that the battle had been fought on two fronts from the beginning, one in orbit, one in memory. Humanity had not merely destroyed his fleet, it had made sure the galaxy would know why. For the first time since the engagement began, fear turned into something worse. Regret. Outside, the last organized Ver resistance collapsed. A handful of destroyers attempted emergency jumps without navigation integrity and tore themselves apart. Several cruisers powered down and transmitted surrender codes. One dreadnought tried to ram a Terran hospital ship after faking distress and vanished under concentrated rail fire from 3 human escorts that had been expecting exactly that. Within 11 minutes of Black Protocol activation, the blockade of Halcyon Prime ceased to exist. Not weakened, not repelled, erased. The moon survived. Its shield domes held. The detention camps were broken open before the first execution order could be carried out. Terran engineers stabilized the orbital wreckage field to prevent impact casualties, then helped Halcyon rescue crews pull both locals and Ver survivors from damaged landers. That, too, spread through the networks. Humanity had brought annihilation to an armed fleet and rescue to the people beneath it, including the enemy's wounded. The contrast hit harder than any propaganda ever could. In the council chamber, delegates who had spent years treating Earth as a useful but preachy younger power now avoided Ambassador Vance's eyes. Some were ashamed. Some were calculating. Some were terrified by the implications. If humanity had kept such a doctrine hidden, what else sat behind those careful diplomatic smiles and those endless legal arguments? How many times had Earth chosen patience not because it lacked fangs, but because it knew exactly where they belonged? Vance finally stepped forward.
The Terran Union recognizes the surrender of all surviving Dominion personnel in Halcyon space, he said. His voice remained level, but now nobody mistook that for softness. Medical treatment will be provided consistent with Council law. Civilian reconstruction aid begins immediately. Full battle telemetry, including the hostage threat and unlawful occupation orders, is being transmitted to every Council archive and every sovereign government with standing access. He paused, and in that pause, the entire chamber leaned toward him. Let the record show that humanity requested withdrawal. Humanity requested compliance with law. Humanity offered restraint until restraint was answered with contempt and a threat against civilians. The responsibility for what happened in Halcyon orbit belongs to the hand that crossed the line, not the one that stopped it. No one interrupted him. Not the Luth, not the Arkeni, not even the Ver delegation, who sat stricken and silent, as if sudden movement might make the humiliation more real. On the flagship, Zalor stood amid smoke and wreckage, while human marines secured his bridge. He looked once more at the Council feed and saw not outrage against Earth, as he had expected, but something colder settling over the chamber. Recognition. Not affection, not trust. Recognition of a truth too large to ignore, now that it had shown its face. Humans were not fragile because they preferred rules. Humans wrote rules because they understood exactly what waited in the dark when rules failed. Hours later, when the first emergency tribunals convened and the first casualty estimates arrived, the phrase appearing in reports across the Council was the same. Not massacre, not ambush, not even battle. Strategic extinction event. Analysts spent years afterward dissecting what the Terrans had done at Halcyon Prime. They mapped the layered infiltrations, the sensor deceptions, the doctrine of distributed invisibility, the refusal to mirror enemy arrogance, the terrifying efficiency with which humans could turn patient observation into terminal force. Military academies from the inner ring to the fringe rewrote curricula. Empires reconsidered border policies. Neutral worlds quietly requested Terran defense compacts. And everywhere, from palace war rooms to freighter mess halls, one lesson spread faster than any official declaration could contain. Humanity did not bluff. They negotiated harder than anyone because they knew the price of the alternative better than anyone. They delayed because they measured consequences more carefully than anyone. They looked civilized because civilization, to them, was a barricade built over an abyss they had no intention of falling into again. But if someone kicked that barricade down, with civilians behind it, with hostages on camera, with laughter over an open channel, then all the patience vanished and something older took its place. Something cold. Something ocean deep. Something final. Admiral Zalor was transported under guard to stand trial before the same council chamber in which he had laughed. He entered with his crest shorn and his title stripped, and for a long moment he said nothing. The room waited. Historians would later argue whether he intended defiance or confession. In the end, it hardly mattered, because when asked if he wished to make a statement, the once proud architect of the Halcyon occupation looked toward the human delegation and spoke only 7 words. "I thought they feared us more." Nobody answered him. They didn't have to. The galaxy already knew better. He laughed at humanity. Then humanity went to work.